ratio of the voltage across it to the current flowing in it. So I will pass some DC into the coil. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes, you go. Pass AC into this coil. We've got about 5 amps of it, have we? No, less than that. We want some more. That's it. About 5 amps of that, yeah. And then we can use a second coil merely connected to a voltmeter. When I put this second coil on the top, it gets some induced voltage by a mechanism which I do not understand, and I suspect neither does anyone else. But if I turn this second coil at right angles, it's always been our experience, you can find a place where the voltage is 0, as long as the coils remain at right angles. It's as if they lived in separate worlds and didn't want to know about each other. Now, in that respect, I was reminded by a drawing by
Head east.
Escher, who's done many marvelous drawings, that it was like the drawing of the men on the staircase. And of them, the artist himself said, here we have 3 forces of gravity working perpendicular to one another. Here is an artist being more of a scientist than we are ourselves. 3 earth planes, he said, cut across each other at right angles, and human beings are living on each of them. It is impossible for the inhabitants of different worlds to walk or sit or stand on the same floor because they have different conceptions of what is horizontal and what is vertical. Yet they may well share the use of the same staircase. On the top staircase, illustrated here, 2 people are moving side by side and in the same direction, and yet one of them is obviously going downstairs and the other upstairs. Contact between them is out of the question because they live in 2 different worlds and therefore can have no knowledge of each other's existence. They remind me sometimes of a chemist and an engineer. Although the artist has only used a trick of perspective to influence the mind of the observer, it is a lively, healthy influence indeed for me. Gyroscopes are essentially circular things. A scientific gyro is usually mounted in gimbal rings, so that there is the wheel, here is the inner ring, here is the outer ring. All 3 sets of pivots, the axes pass through the center of mass of the gyro. Now I will tell you what precession is. A torque, by the way, is a twisting force. Instead of a push, which is a force, you push a thing which is pivoted and it twists. So torque is a twisting force. The result of the twisting force is a movement ring. All 3 sets of pivots.
Head east on I-80 East.
Pass through the center of mass of the gyro. Now I will tell you what precession is. A torque, by the way, is a twisting force. Instead of a push, which is a force, you push a thing which is pivoted and it twists. So torque is a twisting force. The result of the twisting force is a movement, a rotation, but not in the axis in which you applied the torque. And we call that precession. So I put a torque on the outer ring, it is the inner that precesses. I put a torque on the inner ring, it is the outer that precesses. It will work in either direction. Oh, you're cheating, I can hear my critics saying. You're pulling it round as well as doing that. All right, we will satisfy the critics. We will hang a weight from the inner ring so that gravity and not I shall put on the torque. And there you see a precession. Not the sort of movement you really expected, because you are accustomed in higher mathematics to a torque producing an acceleration. Here, a torque produces purely a rotation. And if I put 3 times the mass on, I get 3 times the angular velocity. A different sort of device from our common experience. Now, what I want you to notice this time is, I'll spin it up again because it's getting a little slow. I want you to notice how it accelerates when I put the weight on and how it decelerates.
All right. So I was going to be quick, but the realization of this, that type of technology being in the Bible as a vision, or not even a vision, actually something that happened for real. That in itself is kind of like a proof or a deeper level of evidence that maybe Jesus is an alien for real, and they're made from different densities of light. Another dimensional person to where they are on a different plane, and they can move through, their magnetic direction, their magnetic perception, I guess, and be in a different realm. All right. So anyway, that they really could be aliens from like spaceships and stuff like this, for real. And them hopping through the future and the past. Think of all the crazy things we have ideas of. Why wouldn't they be actually doing it already? So, the angels. I'm talking about the angels and Jesus. Like that would be the reason why things are the way they are. So, I'm just going to leave that with you. All right, hold it down.
Ezekiel Chapter 1. In the 30th year, on the 5th day of the 4th month, while I was among the exiled people by the river Kibar, the heavens were opened, and I began to see visions of God. On the 5th day of the month, that is, in the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim, the word of Jehovah came to Ezekiel, son of Buzi the priest, by the river Kibar in the land of the Chaldeans. There the hand of Jehovah came upon him. As I was looking, I saw a tempestuous wind coming from the north, and there was a huge cloud and flashing fire, surrounded by a bright light, and from the midst of the fire was something that looked like electrum. Within it were what looked like 4 living creatures, and the appearance of each one was like that of a human. Each one had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their feet were straight, and the soles of their feet were like those of a calf, and they were shining like the glow of burnished copper. They had human hands under their wings on all 4 sides, and the 4 of them had faces and wings. Their wings were touching one another. They would not turn when they went. They would each go straight forward. Their faces had this appearance. Each of the 4 had a man's face with a lion's face on the right, a bull's face on the left, and each of the 4 had an eagle's face. That is how their faces were. Their wings were spread out above them.
Head east on
Each
I-80
had 2
East.
wings that were touching one another, and 2 wings covering their bodies. They would each go straight forward, going wherever the Spirit would incline them to go. They would not turn as they went. And the living creatures had the appearance of burning coals of fire, and something that looked like torches of bright fire was moving back and forth between the living creatures, and lightning was flashing out from the fire. And when the living creatures would go forth and return, their movement had the appearance of flashes of lightning. As I was watching the living creatures, I saw 1 wheel on the earth beside each of the living creatures with 4 faces. The wheels and their structure appeared to glow like chrysolite, and the 4 of them looked alike. Their appearance and structure looked as though a wheel were within a wheel. When they moved, they could go in any of the 4 directions without turning as they went. Their rims were so high that they inspired awe, and the rims of all 4 were full of eyes all around. Whenever the living creatures moved, the wheels would move along with them, and when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels would also be lifted up. They would go where the Spirit inclined them to go, wherever the Spirit went. The wheels would be lifted up together with them, for the Spirit operating on the living creatures was also in the wheels. When they moved, these would move, and when they stood still, these would stand still. And when they were lifted up from the earth, the wheels would be lifted up together with them, for the Spirit operating on the living creatures was also in the wheels. Over the heads of the living creatures was the likeness of an expanse that sparkled like awesome ice, stretched out above their heads. Under the expanse their wings were straight, one to the other. Each one had 2 wings for covering one side of their bodies, and